You are now listening to the House by the Video Store podcast.
There's no more room in hell. The dead will walk near.
We have such sights to show you.
I kick ass for the Lord.
Great Scott, keep away!
Welcome to the House by the Video Store podcast. I am your host, William, and joining me today will be...
Sean
and Derek.
And in this episode, we had already mentioned on Twitter we're going to cover Big Trouble in Little China, the 1986 John Carpenter, Kurt Russell film. But we all just saw Jurassic World today, so I guess we'll go ahead and cover that too, since it's on track to possibly be the number one opening weekend of all time when the final numbers come in Monday, because we're recording this Sunday night. But it had the largest international debut of all time. It made over $500 million this weekend. So might as well go ahead and talk about that one too.
and a lot of people get murdered in it, so you know.
And when you think about it, so like when you look at Steven Spielberg's filmography, because he didn't direct the Jurassic World, but like Jaws was a horror film.
Yeah,
that was a big summer budget. It was a big budget summer movie, like the first real summer movie. And then Jurassic Park was kind of in that same wheelhouse. It was a horror movie filtered through family-oriented, big-budget summer movie. And then this one kind of follows the same path. Like, if you just took out the dinosaurs and put in, like, a guy wearing a mask and a knife, then it would probably be considered a horror film.
Yes.
Yeah, in some extent, yeah. Because some of the scenes are done in a way that are very horror filmish, you know?
Yeah, I don't think there was as many. I guess we're just going to jump into this, right?
Yeah, we'll just go straight into it. We will not be doing any big spoilers for the movie since it just came out. We're just giving general opinions and stuff that you would have seen in the trailers.
Yeah, I feel like Spielberg is... He's someone, he just has it in him. Like, he loves to direct these scenes that, like, have horror in them in a lot of his films. And this film, it had, you know, I guess some tense moments, but Colin didn't seem, you know, those horror, quote-unquote, horror elements. It seems like he's in there because that's kind of the tradition of Jurassic Park. But Spielberg, he's, like, got it in him. Like, he makes these big, massively appealing films that are sometimes family films, but he always puts these little horror scenes in there, or, you know, like the first Jurassic Park, the raptor chase in the kitchen and stuff.
Well, without giving like too much away the movie, it kind of had a nod to Aliens, like a little bit of James Cameron stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
Because there's a scene with the raptors and some soldiers, and like the screenshots they do are very reminiscent. And that's like the first thing it reminded me of was Aliens, because you just see like all the stuff happening to them, but from a perspective of both the soldiers and the raptors. And I thought that was a pretty good. To me, it seemed a lot like Aliens. I don't know.
But then again, Aliens is more of an action than a horror.
Yeah.
Well, and two, one thing actually to tie this into a podcast from a week ago. So the kid in the movie, so there's like a couple of brothers that are some of the main characters. The younger kid, Gray, he was actually in Insidious and Insidious Chapter 2.
Oh yeah, he was, wasn't he? Okay.
So that ties it back into that series.
Yeah.
I didn't even realize that.
But
yeah, I knew him from. I was like, that kid's familiar now. That makes sense.
Just to backtrack, the director was Colin Trevorrow. So if you've seen the movie Safety Not Guaranteed, he directed that, and that's a movie about time travel starring Mark Duplass and Aubrey Plaza.
Did you guys see that?
Yeah.
I have not.
So,
What did you think about that, real quick?
I mean, it's a small independent movie. I liked it a lot. It's one of the movies that kind of the Duplass brothers ilk, more mumblecore, so it's more people talking about things than anything actually happening.
Yeah.
And then there's only like a little bit that kind of goes into the time travel stuff, but I liked it quite a bit.
I liked it well enough, but I kind of forgot about it quickly. And the whole time I'm like, why in the hell did they pick this guy? I mean, Spielberg's addressed it. You know, it reminds him of a younger version of himself and everything. And overall, I think he did a pretty good job with the movie. Like, kind of to start from the beginning, I liked the movie quite a bit. But as a summer blockbuster movie, you know, he did a good job at kind of making it feel like a Jurassic Park film. It didn't feel like an imitation or knockoff like some of these sequels feel like that are set like 20 years afterwards, you know, that seems to be popular right now. But even though he kind of, it felt like a Spielberg film, it didn't feel like he was doing a bunch of imitating Spielberg that made it feel cheap or anything. Obviously, he's not Spielberg, but for the most part, it was a lot of fun, you know.
Oh yeah, and the other thing too is like I'm a huge Chris Pratt fan, So like I'm glad to see him getting, he had Guardians of the Galaxy, the Lego movies, and he's had this. So he's kind of went from being like I only knew him from Parks and Recreation and other stuff. It was kind of funny to see his career over the past 2 or 3 years go from being just kind of like a bit character on movies and TV to being probably one of the biggest actors in the world.
He was he's married to Anna Faris, who was in all the Scary Movie films. I think she's on some CBS show now. So when they started dating or married or whatever, so she was by far the bigger star, and now he's like one of the biggest stars in the world, bigger than Tom Cruise, Will Smith. I mean, because I think at this point you could put him in anything, and it's probably going to open pretty well, as opposed to Will Smith, After Earth. Who gives a shit?
Yeah.
Speaking of which, real quick, M. Night Shyamalan directed that. I did watch Unbreakable for the first time today. I like that movie.
Unbreakable was
good.
It's a great movie. That was like M. Night Shyamalan's golden years. Yeah. He peaked almost 15 years ago.
He had 3 movies that did well at the box office and that are overall more liked than hated. So you have, of course, The Sixth Sense, Unbreakable, and Signs. Still, people probably split about half and half on like and don't like that movie, but everything after that's mostly firmly in the hate category.
Yeah, I didn't hate The Village.
I saw the trailer for it. I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to hate this.
Bryce Howard Dallas is in that.
Yeah.
Tie it back to Jurassic World.
Who is not Jessica Chastain.
Yeah, no.
There's a big thing. So if you haven't been following, so Bryce Dallas Howard is in Jurassic World. She's the redhead. She's been in a number of other movies. She was in Spider-Man 3, regrettably. Actually, where she played a blonde, which was odd. And then Jessica Chastain is an actress who is in Zero Dark 30, Interstellar. She's been in a bunch of other stuff, and everyone confuses them for each other, at least in the entertainment world.
Which it may be frustrating, but at least both of them are very attractive and very talented. You know what I mean? So it's, it's not like she's getting mixed up with somebody who's horrible. It's like, I'm not that person,
Well, in the early 2000s, everyone confused Isla Fisher and Amy Adams, who are both also kind of red-haired actresses, have similar builds, and although Isla Fisher has an accent, but
yeah.
But back to this movie. So by far the gold standard for summer action movies has been set by Mad Max Fury Road.
Yeah,
that was a movie where I've seen another number of other people. I think it was Jeff Kanata, who's on the /Filmcast that we also listen to, that said it was like a summer movie that needs you don't have to make any excuses for it. You just tell people to watch it. You don't have to qualify it.
Well, here's how I'm going to
This movie has a lot of qualifiers.
Well, yeah, I think that if you break, in my opinion, I really enjoyed Jurassic World, but I think Mad Max was a better overall movie and was a deeper movie, whereas Jurassic World was more of just, it was just a summer blockbuster. It was very good at what it did. It wasn't deep. It didn't have a lot of deep meaning to it. It was just a fun kind of, I don't want to say mindless movie, because it's not completely mindless, but it was just, it was just a good movie. I think Mad Max is a little deeper and I still enjoyed it way more, but it's not going to make the type of money Jurassic World's going to make.
Yeah. Jurassic World, it was paced very well. It was like a Spielberg film, and that had all these great story beats. But like I told you guys after the movie, the filler of some of the dialogue kind of didn't match up to it. Because it was, they did a lot of things where they philosophized about creating dinosaurs and all this stuff, just like they do, and they did in the original Jurassic Park movie and in the sequel. But it just, none of that really panned out for me. It felt like it was there because it had to be.
And go ahead.
I feel like this movie, I hate to say it, because it had a large cast, but it still felt kind of empty as far as the characters they had. Chris Pratt did a great job, and all the main characters, but it just felt like, it just felt like the other Jurassic Park movies just had a bigger cast. Even if it didn't actually have more stars in it, it just felt, I don't know,
even Chris Pratt's character, I like him a whole lot too, but I feel like they didn't use him to his potential.
Well, I almost felt
you know who he is in most movies, so he's like, oh, he has a little bit of that, but he just felt like I think he probably made a lot of the character up himself, but he didn't want to go too far to kind of.
Well, it just seems they reined in his characterizations and a lot of the stuff he does in his roles, because they only gave him a few times or a few chances to kind of be the funny, charming stuff he typically does.
Yeah. But they didn't give him anything to make up for that. You
Yeah.
know?
Well, I also feel like too though in this movie they tried to kind of go with like the Clint Eastwood-ish doesn't talk very much character, but Chris Pratt's his type of acting performances don't mesh well with that because like you said he's kind of got that charm going. So I think because he didn't have a lot of dialogue.
Well, and two, like this movie, so if you compare this to the original Jurassic Park, which is a fair comparison because this one movie has a fair number of callbacks to that movie. In the original Jurassic Park, the characters all had like arcs. Like you could identify at the end of the movie. It's like, okay, well, Dr. Grant wasn't a big fan of kids, but by the end of the movie, you know, he kind of was in the more of the parental role, like protecting the kids, and then Malcolm, the Jeff Goldblum character, you know, gets a little bit more humanized through the course of the movie. As opposed to this movie, there's like a somewhat of an arc for the Bryce Dallas Howard's character Claire. Like there's somewhat of an arc for her, but by the end of the movie, most people wouldn't be able to tell you what it is.
Yeah.
Chris Pratt's character is kind of the same throughout. The two kids are the ones that have the most growth, and they actually do a pretty good job in this film.
It's funny to me though is like all Jurassic Park movies. I guess the biggest complaint I have is that they always center around children. They got 4 in the franchise now, and they all revolve around saving children.
Yeah.
You know,
Well,
can we
in part
ever
two-
get to a Jurassic Park movie where we don't have to save children?
Here's one element I love about that I was watching this movie. I was thinking, oh, this is classic Jurassic Park. It's little kids being traumatized by seeing horrible things like dinosaurs killing people, you know, getting ripped apart. And it's just a constant barrage of that in this film, which is pretty entertaining.
But I think, Derek, you're forgetting the fact that in Jurassic Park 2, The Lost World, Jeff Goldblum's daughter does gymnastics and drop kicks a raptor.
Yeah.
She's no victim. She's a strong independent woman that don't need no man to stop a raptor for her.
Well, I just feel like, you know, like I said, I really enjoyed the movie, but they're not treading any new water. It's just kind of like, you know, in Jurassic Park that a kid's going to be in danger and they're going to have to save it. And that's your plot. You know, enter new dinosaur, same story.
This movie was, you kind of knew it was coming most of the time. You know, as far as, the story beats, you're like waiting. I don't want to spoil anything, but you're waiting for the dinosaurs to get out. You're waiting for the kids to get in trouble. You know, you kind of know these things are coming. And that's, again, it doesn't make it as enjoyable because it's not as surprising, but it's fine because you're kind of building up that anticipation and knowing that shit's just going to get crazy eventually.
Oh, yeah.
And it does, and it's very satisfying on that level because this is in some ways more than the first film. Not that it's better, but it's just kind of the plot of the film where they make this new dinosaur. It's just more action, you know, a bigger park. It's just more.
It's more immersive. Like it feels real. It feels more real because like a lot of the shots they did, like the big pans, it felt like a real place. And I think from the fact that they, you know, like we're not giving too much away, but it just made it feel real. Whereas I think let's just say this too, the CGI was great in the movie. You know, I thought it was very good. I didn't really see any part where it just looked super fake.
To be fair, though, there are plenty of people that have said that CGI has gotten worse in the 20 years since the first one, and they thought this one had too much CGI. So,
well, yeah. I mean, maybe it did, but they also did more with the dinosaurs in this one than they did in the first.
The CGI looked good for CGI, but actually something that made me feel like it didn't feel it. The park was awesome as far as, hey, this seems like a place that could exist. As you know, had these little shops. It's like Disney World, you know. But a lot of the cinematography, sometimes they always looked well lit, like almost they were taking portrait photographs of the actors. Like Chris Pratt, his face was always lit perfectly, like outside all the time. There was even a scene when he was like inside of a cage, and it's like there's no shadows on his face. There's nothing going on, and it felt like a lot of it was possibly shot just in a studio, you know, on a studio lot, and then green screened in or whatever. So I feel like that part it lost some texture to it for me. It didn't feel like they were kind of in this world. It something didn't feel right, and I think it's not only the use of CGI. Maybe that's what some people are kind of confusing with that too. I mean, not to say there isn't something to be said from animatronics, but yeah, I definitely feel like a lot of this was shot in a studio, and that's what kind of lost some of the feel.
And two, like one thing that is very noticeable. Like when you think about it after, in retrospect, or when you're watching the movie, the first Jurassic Park had some of the major set pieces take place at night, which helped cover up their use of animatronics and CGI and helped them blend it a little bit easier. Everything in this movie, with the exception of some pieces at the end, are in full daylight. So I think that too could be one of the things that, for some people, makes it a little bit clearer that everything's CG. And just to be clear, everybody, so all three of us saw the movie earlier, and we all saw it in 3D. So we didn't see it in 2D, which might be a little bit different experience. But this is a movie where I thought the 3D, even though they didn't shoot it all in 3D, I believe it was post-converted. When you have a movie like this that's so CGI anyway, it's not as big of a deal when they post-convert it that way. Because, most of it's computer animated anyway, which is easier to convert to 3D. But just to kind of give you an overall, so the movie is based on the fact that they have a park, and that to keep people interested, they create a new hybrid dinosaur. This is all stuff that's in the trailer, and one last synopsis doesn't really ruin anything. So if that general premise pisses you off, you're probably not going to like the movie, because it is I would say it's kind of a dumb superhero, or not superhero, just like a dumb summer film.
It's better than Avengers 2.
Okay, we will not mention that or the other one, the one with cars in it. We banned those from the podcast.
Wait, is this the seventh one in the series? Is that what you're talking about? Okay.
Yeah.
We've mentioned those enough. But, this movie it's kind of like the dumb fun movie, but I still put it leagues ahead of shit like Transformers, where I could barely stand to watch it. Other recent summer movies. I think this one fairly sits in the it was fun to watch category.
Mm-hmm. The whole time it was because it was well paced,
and it pulls on the heartstrings a little bit with callbacks to the original, but it's not overly done. But it is a movie too that will probably warrant watching again to see if the nostalgia factor kind of wears off. As Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, I thought that I enjoyed that movie when I walked out of the theater. Then I watched it again when it came out on Blu-ray, and I was like, "Oh, wait a minute, no."
I think one thing about this movie too, though, is even if you've never seen any of the original three, this one stands alone. Like, you don't have to have had watched the previous three to think that this is a good movie. It still, like you said, it has a bunch of callbacks to the original on some ends, but it's very much its own movie. So it's got an entirely new cast of characters. So if you've never seen the original three, you don't have to see any of them. And I think this one stands pretty well on its own, kind of like Fury Road did too. Like, those are two movies where they have passed, but the new ones don't rely on it too much, and they stand pretty much well on their own without any assistance.
And you mentioned Indiana Jones, like I was talking earlier, these films that have sequels after years later. Of course, that was much longer ago than Jurassic Park, but this film kind of had everything going against it. Like, for me, the director, I'm like, oh man, they're giving him this film. That's his next movie after Safety Not Guaranteed. It's a sequel to Jurassic Park, and people are going to hold it up next to that first film in the franchise, not the second or third one. So it had a lot of things going for it, but even because of that, I still think it came out really well. It kind of beat a lot of the odds that were against it.
Yeah, I agree with you completely. It's kind of like what I said about like Insidious 3 last week. Like, it had everything that it should have been a shit movie, to be honest, and it didn't. And I think Jurassic Park, like you said, had a lot of those things going to it. That it was a new movie based on an old franchise. Since the original one came out, it's almost about 20 years since the original, right?
Over 20 years,
it's over. 20.
Over. Yeah, because like the second and third,
Well, this one kind of disregards them too.
Yeah, it doesn't get much. Well, it kind of disregards almost all. It just acknowledges that the park existed, and that's really about it.
And that people died there.
Yeah, and that people died there. But, I think that was a good move on their part, though, too, because I think if you want to get a new cast in, you want to make a new franchise, you can't really keep going back to the old people, the original ones. So,
but real quick, Chad, who I guess is our webmaster, kind of the reason the site started, he hated the film and the CGI. So too bad he's not on here, though.
So it's one of those movies where I'm trying to think of, like, you could pick apart some of the decisions that are made by characters in the movies or some of the things that happen, and I wouldn't begrudge anyone for doing so. Trying to think without spoiling anything. So if you, so this movie does a thing that a lot of action movies do. So there's people in a room, and there's a few people there with guns and stuff, and they're picking up equipment and and they're like packing stuff up. But then the second something happens that would be benefited by them being there, they're no longer in sight or in the building at all. So so it's one of those movies where things happen conveniently for the story, and it's a lot of it is the action movie logic where people sometimes do things that are kind of stupid, but if you pick it to death, I'm sure you could find plenty of things wrong with it. But I think it's just a fun amusement park type ride of a movie. It worked.
Yeah, I mean, you could, like you said, you definitely could, and it's you could look at it as lazy writing, but at the same time, there's a trade off. If they couldn't find solutions, they kind of bobbed and weaved through those things to say, well, let's make some concessions here and kind of just hopefully nobody pays too much attention to this, and and they kind of weave their way nicely enough for me to enjoy the film.
Well, and one thing too I've seen people complain about is just the general premise of the movie that after 20 years people would be bored of dinosaurs and they have to create a new one. And the thing I say to that is, while it is kind of ridiculous, in the real world, if this was an amusement parks do have to introduce new rides or exhibits every so often to help drive up attendance. And if it's a publicly traded company, I've worked in, Fortune 500 land for the past 8 or so years, simply maintaining your profits doesn't work. You have to continue to grow the profits. So, Apple comes out with the iPhone, like, wow, this is one of the most amazing devices you ever made. What's next? Mm-hmm. So it's not inconceivable that after, operating for 10 or 15 years, the park has to keep doing new things to draw attention and to placate the shareholders. So while I think it's kind of stupid to create genetically altered dinosaurs, I do get how they could make that a plot point. So I didn't have, just basic problems with it on that level like some people do.
I totally got that, because it's like if you've been to some place multiple times, I mean, granted, people go to the zoo over and over, but you just think about, while I was watching the movie, think about the cost it would take to go to Jurassic Park. How much are tickets to Disney World alone? And that's just maintaining rides and staff.
I think
you know what I mean? Like, it would be astronomical prices to go to this park.
So somebody had done some research. I see people talking about it on Twitter earlier. So they said they estimated to build a Jurassic Park, it probably costs about $120 billion. And they estimated that just the cost of traveling and likely park tickets for a family of 4 would be $10,000 before you even consider lodging and stuff like that.
Totally, yeah. That's about what I was expecting.
So what you're saying is we should feel no sympathy for anybody in the movie that got attacked by the dinosaurs.
They were actually working on behalf of the 99%.
I knew Spielberg was a communist.
So I guess when you look at through the lens of it's a $15,000 family vacation, it makes more sense. They have to keep upping the ante to make people who've paid to go there once come back. Mm-hmm. Like I said, I think, it's a fun summer movie. I mean, if you're looking for great character growth and development and a statement about modern culture, this is probably not the place to look.
They try to make statements about, as some people pointed out, kind of blockbuster films and cinema in general, like bigger, badder, and everything, But at the same time, there's so much dumb stuff, it doesn't make it feel super smart. And like I said, the dialogue's flat. It doesn't really live up to all that.
Well, and they did one of the same things that movies like Kick-Ass. So Kick-Ass was a movie that was kind of taking on the superhero genre and doing it from the perspective of what if a normal person tried to do this? And it was making fun of the superhero genre tropes. But by the last 15 of the minutes, they fully embraced it and went full on like it was any other superhero film. Mm-hmm. I think that's what happened here too, because they pointed fun at some of the stuff, but then they fully embraced it and did the exact same things.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a reason movies do those things, and it's to please the audience. And so I thought this was a fun movie. Like I said, if just the idea of a genetically modified dinosaur to boost profits insults your intelligence, then you're probably not going to like the movie. But if you're okay with, just a thrill ride that doesn't necessarily, tick every single box on is this logical, then you'll probably enjoy it.
Yeah, pretty much right there with you. I liked it a lot watching it in theaters, and I'll watch it again for sure. And that's kind of not really my feeling on some of these summer movies I've watched so far. Some we won't name.
Yeah,
but for the most part, I liked it. I enjoyed it. I don't go in thinking, especially like I said, my expectations weren't high because I felt like I had a lot going against it. So, I mean, the first one had a lot of good discussions about kind of the morals and ethical decisions behind making the park and all this. And this tries to emulate that. Doesn't really do it for me all the time. It has some interesting commentary, like the kids like on their cell phones instead of watching, a Tyrannosaurus Rex eat something. I mean, there's some funny stuff in there, and it's pretty good. But it's they packaged a nice summer blockbuster movie. Like I said, it never gets boring. It's well paced. It builds up some good drama. And also, when they first show the park, like from the kids' hotel room, spoiler, they have this big opening shot. Like I was thinking, oh shit, I want to go to Jurassic Park so bad.
Yeah, like you said, it looked so awesome, and like they just made this one. It felt like a real, place. It felt like they just went to like Disneyland and filmed it there. So it just looked like a really awesome place you wanted to be at.
Yeah, and that's the feel of that first film. And like I said, it emulates enough to where I feel like they're successful. But he's not Spielberg, but he did a pretty damn good job.
Like I will say, like on the amusement park side, like I did think that this one, I mean, in the first one, the park wasn't open yet and it wasn't completed. They were just doing, like the test runs of it before they started to make it public. But this one felt, like you said, like it looked like what an amusement park looks like. Because like, the paddock areas with all the vendors, and it was set up very much like the amusement parks I've been to. Even the Jurassic Park, the ride at Universal Studios in Florida. And two, there's one, I don't want to spoil this, but there's one part that's kind of like a dino petting zoo. Like, I would be happy.
Which was awesome.
If they just built that and let you visit that,
I would go
to that.
Being a 25-year-old person, I would go ride this shit.
I'd pay a couple $1,000s to ride a baby dinosaur.
Fuck yeah.
Like, there's a couple years ago, they had like the walking with the dinosaurs thing. And actually, like the girls, I think at the time, I tried to convince her to go, and she didn't want to. So I was really sad.
It had Lego dinosaurs too. They do that every now and then.
But like I said, I think if what we said, encourage you to see it. I still think it's a fun time at the movies. If you're gonna pick it to death, then it's probably not up your alley. But there's still fun to be had with it. But
I mean, I think it was really good for what it was. It was great at it. It did everything it was supposed to do. It just, like I said, it lacked a little depth, but most summer blockbuster movies do. Ones that are going to make the amount of money this one's make, they're not going to be, it's kind of like the movie Avatar, where it's like Avatar. It was like a good movie, but it like that one maybe it was a little bit. I don't really care much for it, but it was kind of deep, whatever. But it's on the same level as that. Like. It did what it was supposed to do, and it gave you really good views. It gave you some awesome views of stuff, and it's nice to look at, And
two, one thing I'll give that movie, Jurassic World, is that it didn't feel like a lot of franchise movies now where it feels like part one is just a prequel to part two, where they just assume the audience is going to be into all these movies. Like, this one was a relatively self-contained story. Like, if they never made another one, this one ended at a point you're like, oh, okay, that was a good story.
That's one thing, too, I really enjoyed. It similar to Fury Road, it wasn't a cliffhanger. It was a self-contained story that gave ways for other movies to be made in that world, but it didn't leave you with the obvious cliffhanger. If it just, like you said, if they just decided to never make another one, you'd be okay with it because it ended.
Which will not happen in this case with this $500 million.
Yeah. Oh, they're going to make probably like 7 of them, but like I said, if they never revisited this cast of characters, you wouldn't be left with any major questions.
I just want to see the group of protesters like Jeff Goldblum and everybody protesting out front of the park, saying, you know what I mean, the dangers of it. I wish there would have been those characters in there, then they would feel vindicated when everything went to shit.
Chaos.
Just
there had to be protesters.
Just have all the original cast, like, so if they do another movie, they can have all the original cast from the originals, so like Sam Neill, Laura Dern, Jeff Goldblum, all making like the daytime talk TV circuit, saying, well, I told them 20 years ago not to do this.
Well, here's the thing, though. Jeff Goldblum's character is only brought, in the book, there's a book, right? I believe in the book, his character died. So I think the only reason why they brought him back in the second one was because Jeff Goldblum made the character popular. So technically, they just don't act like that he's dead.
I don't remember. Like, I didn't read any of the books.
I read one of them back when I was in college, and I'm pretty sure his character died. So, but they just brought him back because he's really popular because of Jeff Goldblum.
But
that was like Jeff Goldblum back in the days where he was relevant.
All right, so I think that wraps up our discussion on
Don't you talk ill of
Jurassic
Jeff
World.
Goldblum.
He was also in years ago movies.
Yeah, he's gonna be in some upcoming summer blockbusters when the new Independence Day hits theaters.
Oh yeah, hopefully they have.
He's in Wes Anderson films.
Yeah, yeah. Steve Zissou.
Not,
Aquatic.
not to get too off topic, but the Independence Day movies they're making, the Bill Pullman's daughter in those movies is going to be played by Micah Monroe, who is in It Follows and The Guest.
I guess the biggest question though is he going to make some more motivational speeches about how we're not going to go silently into the night?
Like, is it going to happen on July 4th again? He's like, this is our Independence Day 30th anniversary.
But another thing too though is he's no longer president.
Well, aliens changed the world. They added some constitutional amendments, and he can be president for life.
Yeah, because he was successfully. Didn't he fly a plane and kill aliens and stuff? And,
Yes.
Yeah. So if you do that, yeah, you get to be president for however long you want to be.
But what's ironic? So in the Independence Day movies, the original movie, the daughter of the president, I have to look her name up real quick. Was it Mae Whitman? She was
Arrested Development.
Egg from Arrested Development, or Anne, as they say.
Oh, it was Anne.
And there was a big controversy because because when they made the new movie, she wasn't really on like the short list of actresses to play the part that she played 20 years prior, and they went with Micah Monroe. And there are people just saying like, yeah, they're like, was this being sexism because they wanted somebody who's more attractive? And not that I'm going to voice in on that opinion. I think that both her and then the actress who replaced her, Micah Monroe, were both very good. But I'm not really sure why they went with somebody to play the role they played 20 years prior.
Why they wouldn't or why they would?
Why they wouldn't even bring him back because,
just to at least give him a test, yeah.
Because it's not an example of like a movie where they have like a kid actor who sucks and never did anything, so they don't want to bring him back. It was actually like, an actress who went on to have a pretty good career, so it wouldn't make a lot of sense just to completely bypass him, but maybe when Will Smith said he wasn't come back, they just said, fuck you to the original cast aside from Jeff Goldblum and Bill Pullman.
Will Smith isn't coming back. What's he even doing now? Like he's just doing
he's raising his he's breeding his Hollywood children.
Yeah.
And he's going to be like the third build villain in the Suicide Squad movie that's coming up about the DC villains.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, which that's just something like that's just to me is a bunch of minutia. Like I don't care that much about the DC universe anyway outside of Batman, and I really don't want to watch a movie about Batman villains.
Okay.
No Batman.
The villains Batman is in it, spoiler.
Oh, he is.
There was some set photos leaked.
The Ben Affleck Batman or somebody else?
Yeah.
Batfleck.
Oh.
But, I could be interested in the villains, even though, I could be interested in that if they do it the right way.
It depends on how they portray them. Like, I mean, I've seen Jared, whatever you say his name.
Leto.
Yeah, 30 Seconds to Mars guy. I've seen him as the Joker, and
the question I have for that is, where did he go? Where did he go to get the tattoos all over him that said "ha ha"?
Well,
like, did he go to somebody and say, "Okay, I want let's go through all the list of fonts you have"?
Well, actually, that photo was just a commemorative photo of taking like all the stuff that made the Joker.
I think that was a rumor.
But I think
really?
I think there's been set photos where he has the tattoo.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, see, to me, that's because at first I thought that was just like something they were doing because I've read like 4 different things on it. But that's how they're portraying it, and I'm uninterested.
I saw another promotional photo that had Harley Quinn giving him tattoos.
I thought you were going to say a PJ.
That's what I thought was going. It's just like one of those things where it's like, I mean, it could be. I'm not saying it won't be I'm not saying it's going to be a bad movie.
Hey, it's at least it's a slight twist on the superhero movie.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's been so many. They're going to do like a DC whatever.
But I guess
Super Friends. What the hell are they called?
Justice
League.
Well, they just rebooted the Justice League too, the cartoon anyway, but it's all like reversed and dark.
But I think too, just I guess we can give it the benefit of the doubt because who would have thought going into Insidious Chapter 3 or Jurassic World, just based on everything they had going for them, that they would turn out to be pretty enjoyable movies. So can't really prejudge too much.
And that's why I love movies. I like just going to see them and be like, hey, this wasn't as terrible as I thought.
But we can say that there's certain movies you can't touch and remake, which will bring us to Big Trouble in Little China, the 1986 John Carpenter Kurt Russell film. The brief synopsis from IMDb calls it an all-American, or doesn't call it, but it says that it is an all-American trucker gets dragged into a centuries-old mystical battle in Chinatown. And this was one of the movies that was from the John Carpenter, Kurt Russell collaboration. It was the fourth of 5 films they worked with together, if you include their 1979 made-for-TV Elvis movie.
Yeah.
So
Pop their cherry together.
Yeah. They made the Elvis movie, Escape from New York, The Thing, Big Trouble in Little China, Escape from L.A. 4 of those are great movies, and one of them is Escape from L.A. Well, actually,
my wife loves Escape from L.A.
Just a little tidbit here too, though. That's funny is like, because I watched this movie like on Netflix. One of the movies that popped up that was like you might want to watch because whatever. It was Mortal Kombat. So it's kind of funny seeing how like the God characters from that influenced Mortal Kombat because you definitely kind of got Raiden from that.
yeah.
And then the funny thing is Spielberg was supposed to be. There's rumors that he was going to direct Mortal Kombat, and that fell through. And he was supposed to make a cameo into it, and it just didn't happen because, like, I think the day he was supposed to shoot his cameo in Mortal Kombat, he had something else he had to do.
He read the script.
He had to wash his hair. That's probably what.
Because there is a very Steven Spielberg like character in Mortal Kombat. Because I watched it recently as well.
Yeah,
and
that was supposed to be that. Actually, was supposed to be him.
So what's funny though is we talked about, not to get too off subject, we talked about Jurassic Park earlier. So it came out, was it 94 or 93? It came out
93.
It came out in that period of time. Mortal Kombat came out after that. So Jurassic Park was 93. And Mortal Kombat came out a few years after that in 95. And the special effects in that are absolute shit.
Oh, they're garbage. Like, if anybody remembers the show Reboot? It was like a computer animated show in the 90s
On
about
Fox in the mornings for kids.
There was a scene with Reptile when he first was in there. It looked like just a scene from Reboot. Like, they just took that in and put it in. It's like, it was probably one of the most painful moments in a movie I've watched.
Well, and all the special effects for the characters, like for Scorpion and Sub-Zero, looked about as bad as the video games from the 90s.
Except for Goro, because he actually looked kind of cool.
Because that was like a stop motion and like that was practical and it holds up. And to bring that back to Big Trouble in Little China, it's a movie that has some, 80s special effects. It's mostly probably just stuff being like, hand drawn for lightning bolts and things like that. And we should mention we're going to do full spoilers for this movie since if you're listening to this, you've probably watched it. And the effects in it, some of them are a little bit goofy, but I think overall it holds up and it's fun. And in the movie, Kurt Russell's character even talks about like people flying around on wires.
Yeah.
Jack Burton.
Yeah, I liked his character because it was like it was just Kurt Russell. It was just like grounded and it'd been a long time since I watched this movie, and his character in this one wasn't like, he wasn't like a superhero. He was just kind of oblivious to a lot of the stuff that was going on, and some of the things he did in the movie that went well kind of happened for him accidentally, which I kind of liked. He wasn't.
And
apparently, some people went into the film thinking, "Oh, this." That's our view of Kurt Russell watching stuff after the fact. But apparently, people went in the movie thinking, "Oh, this is going to be Kurt Russell." Like Kurt Russell is a badass kicking ass, from even looking at Carpenter's films, The Thing, think about how serious his character was in that, Escape from New York.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And then this, he, what they pitched it as is, he was a leading role and he had a sidekick, but really they flopped roles and the sidekick did all the ass kicking and he was just kind of bumbles around the whole time.
Yeah, because like the one scene toward the end, they're about to start this huge fight and he shoots his gun in the ceiling and knocks him out for a minite.
Yeah, he drops his knife. He's like everything.
Yeah. Well, that's what I kind of liked because, he had a contribution, but like you said, it was more like his sidekick. It's almost like the Green Hornet to an extent. Like the sidekick was the badass.
That's a good
and
point.
He was just kind of like assisting the sidekick more or less because his partner was like the martial arts expert and he was just kind of a trucker that, had probably never really killed anybody, but just lied about when he did.
Well, like Wang Chi, like his buddy, was originally they had wanted, or John Carpenter wanted Jackie Chan to play that part.
Yeah, I saw that.
The studio thought that he wasn't well enough known to American audiences, and that his English probably wasn't good enough. And they had talked to Jackie Chan, and he said that he didn't want to, focus on making movies, in China for a while before coming back to the American market, which he didn't do really like an American language film until, was it Rush Hour in the mid to late 90s?
Was Rebel in the Bronx not?
Those were all dubbed, I thought.
Was that a dub?
Like Super Cop and Rumble in the Bronx. I thought they were dubbed, but they had theatrical releases.
Those were awesome movies.
Yeah, they were.
So, but the guy they did get to play Wang Chi, I thought he was really good in the role. And,
He kind of reminded me of Short Round. They looked similar.
Racist.
No, it just like they had like a similar
eye structure.
Yeah, they just looked like they were like cousins. Like if I found out that it was like his older brother, I'd be like, oh, okay, makes sense.
Well, and two, it's funny that physically he's much smaller than Kurt Russell's Jack Burton, but he's the one that does all the ass kicking.
Yeah,
and the movie is like they want to do a remake of it with The Rock, which we can get to in a minute. But like some of the elements of the movie are very 80s. I don't know that you could portray Chinese culture in the same ways today
they can't
that they did in this movie.
I always get confused. Was Mr. Miyagi in this? Was that the same?
Yeah, right.
And he was also in Tremors too, right? Tremors 1. But
So Egg.
Yeah, I'm thinking he was in Tremors and in.
See, so
No, that wasn't Pat Morita. No, it wasn't.
Oh,
No.
No, yeah, now I'm seeing Pat Morita. I'm like, no, definitely wasn't. It's
no,
like,
he was in Three Ninjas.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So let's not go too far down the hole of being racist here.
Was it?
He was
racist?
also in Poltergeist: The Legacy, the TV series, for one episode.
Racist.
But it's just when you watch this movie, it's just and then there's some crazy ass elements to it too, like the Wolfman monster thing that shows up a couple times. Like, what is that?
Yeah, and the special effects, they're not great on that, but I think it's one of those things where Carpenter knew what he could get away with this film and it still be good. And this isn't the thing. Obviously, he knows when to kind of push for that. This isn't a movie where you need that stuff. It's just kind of a fun, dumb movie, and it's totally fine. That thing looks a little goofy, and unrealistic.
Well, I love like the scene where you just see like they finally escape the complex and they're about to go out past the security guards. And they walk past the thing on the wall and it had like the old haunted house like gag where the eyes and I think this place is a statue. And then like I love that because that's just kind of like a throwback to the older stuff. But he said it's so goofy and just I love how it's not explained. Like that's like the one thing. Well, actually, a lot of the movie they explain some of it, but they did a good job.
Roll right into it.
Yeah.
Kurt Russell the whole time is trying to play catch up, just like the audience. So he's like, "What? What the hell are you talking about?" When they all know, you know what I mean? These legends or whatever.
Yeah.
And eventually he gets caught up. But yeah, he's kind of the same way as the audience is in this film.
Well, and the one thing that through the course of this movie I found the most unrealistic is that Kurt Russell's white tank top stayed clean through most of the movie. It should have been filthy after they went down the tunnel or went swimming and one time.
All the stuff that's happening, we're gonna, all the sorcery and people using lightning to float around. We're gonna. And it sure didn't get dirty. It's lost me.
And the movie also had a young Kim Cattrall years before she'd be on Sex and the Horseface, and in this performance,
Matthew Broderick is going to kick your ass.
No, he's going to.
He'll just run over you and then not get in trouble for it.
He's going to doughy sit in the corner because he's kind of doughy these days. He's going to sit in the corner and look at me with like eyes about to cry. Be like, man.
No,
Did you see his Super Bowl commercial? It's kind of like the Ferris Bueller redux.
Yeah.
He just looks so sad.
Yeah.
Hey, he was in Godzilla in like 1998, so
all he does is runs around, looks exasperated, and makes his eyes really wide. But back to this movie, when you look at the John Carpenter, Kurt Russell collaborations, I think like my favorite movie of their collaboration and really one of my favorite movies of all time is The Thing. I just think that movie, is just perfectly executed, kind of like Mad Max Fury Road. Like there's no qualifying statements that have to be made. You don't have to explain anything or excuse anything. You just watch it from beginning to end. It's great. Escape from New York, I also like a lot. Still one of my favorite movies. Some of the special effects, are a little bit dated, but it's because it's a low budget movie and made in 1981. And this is a movie that falls in a similar category. It's it's a lot of fun. Some of the acting is a little bit corny. Some of the special effects a little bit corny, but overall it's a fun movie that just has good casting. All the actors are great, and the action scenes are fun to watch.
Yeah, you guys have probably read this too, that it was originally going to be a Western.
Yeah, and then they changed the setting.
Yeah.
It was even going to be, instead of his semi getting stolen, it was his horse.
Yeah.
Well, like one thing too I love though in this movie is because they're like earlier in the movie they're at the airport and the girls they're interested in both get stolen, and so they're trying to deal with that, and like they end up in like the little where the gang war is essentially going on. And they leave the semi truck, and after all this crazy shit that's going on, you have like these godlike guys. They steal a semi truck. And that to me just kind of came fun. Like here, these guys can like use the because I think each of them, one of them had lightning power. I think one of them had wind power. I'm not really sure what the guy with the long hair, like his ability was, but they all had these supernatural abilities, and they stole the semi. Of all the shit that's going on, they take. That's what was kind of funny that they stole a semi.
Well, maybe some of the gang that's working with them took it.
Yeah.
And then
have you guys watched the deleted ending or extended ending? The gang members that like take her in the airport.
Yeah.
At the end of the film, when he's like retrieved his semi and they're driving down the street, they're like talking about take care of one more thing, and they go out to this pier, and those gang members are sitting in a Corvette at the very end of the pier for some reason, and then Jack Burton just rams them off into the water, and he's like, I feel better now. He just like kills these guys. That's like in broad daylight.
Well, apparently too. So the opening part of the movie, the narration with where they're questioning Egg Shin, that was added in to help the audience see Jack Burton is more heroic.
Yeah, that was like the producers, right?
Yeah,
because like
At
really,
request.
he wasn't. He like when you watch that movie, like he was kind of aloof through a lot of it. Like I think like you said, any real rational person that did not know of all the stuff going on would be similar, to him, because like you said, I hadn't watched this movie in probably 5 years or so I had kind of it'd been a while since I watched it. And it was just kind of funny because it's just like I kind of remember it differently than it is, because Kurt Russell really, like I said, he's kind of aloof for the most of. He's not really. The movie sets him up, like you said, being more heroic than his character really is, because he's just kind of figuring everything out. Like you said, he has his moments, but for the most part,
bumbles his way through trouble, like getting into trouble and out of it.
But then he miraculously catches a knife midair and throws it back and gets a dead-on bullseye headshot.
But to be fair, they set that up in the beginning with the bottle trick, know? So it's like, okay, that's the one thing he can do. And catch something and throw it.
And apparently, too, like when the movie was made, like after they made it, they did some test screenings and it tested really well. Mm-hmm. But the movie studio just had no clue what to do with it and didn't promote it much, which is part of the reason it was a flop.
Yeah.
Because, like we talked about the Kurt Russell, John Carpenter connection, out of the movies they made together, only one of them was a hit, which was the first, Escape from New York. Everything else didn't really do well at the box office, but then went on to become a cult hit. Escape from LA, I guess you could still say it was a cult hit. I mean, I think it was I'd have to check this, but I think it's the highest grossing, or right up there with Escape from New York, but its budget was so much larger, it, still lost money. But, this is a movie, the Jack Burton character, and this is part of the reason that we can start talking about the remake. So, The Rock wanting to remake this movie, part of the allure to the Jack Burton character was he was in good shape, but he wasn't in great shape. He was, you could still see truckers who are in that type of shape. If somebody is in the same shape as The Rock, Dwayne Johnson, and they're a trucker, it's like they must be stopping for 4 hours every day to work out and eat like 4,000 calories of chicken. And then I just don't see how you do that and you're a truck driver and a normal guy.
Well, did I hear somebody told me this? I think I don't know if I read it or somebody told me, but they said that he, or maybe I heard it on somewhere, that The Rock apparently said that there's only one Jack Burton, and he wants to get Kurt Russell in on the new film to, I don't know if it's a cameo or what, but he apparently won't be playing Jack Burton. So I don't know his character or whatever's going on with that.
Well,
so
no.
at least he, respects it.
Well, no, they had said they wanted John Carpenter's involvement in it. And I think his answer was the same thing that his answer always is, like, well, show me the money.
Show me the money.
Well, I think one thing too, though, like that, I hate to bring up Fast 7, but like Kurt Russell in that doesn't really look that much different, So you could pretty much put him in that movie, and he looks 10 years older almost, and that's about it. So he could probably, if he wanted to, put a significant part in that movie, the remake. But
yeah, I mean, I think that this is a movie where theoretically, if they were to give it the Mad Max Fury Road treatment and not remake it, just kind of revisit the universe and some of the ideas and some of the constructs, I think the special effects are at a point now that it can make it interesting to watch. I just don't know that it needs it.
yeah, I feel like it's kind of unneeded. It was kind of like when they, perfect example is another movie that had Kurt Russell and John Carpenter, the prequel to The Thing. It was a completely unnecessary movie. Not that it was a bad movie. It was just like, I don't really understand the point of why they did it, because it was 20 years after the movie came out, and it was more of a cult classic than it was a mainstream hit. So...
Well, I think it's just because some people really get into loving these franchises and love them so much they want to make new entries without, there being a real justifiable reason to it, just that they love it. Because originally, the Thing was supposed to be a mini series on Sci-Fi. I think they're gonna make that into a series, and then it ended up morphing into the movie, which was, as you said, pretty unnecessary.
Yeah, because you knew everything you needed to know from the original one. There wasn't much left to the imagination because they pretty much summed it all up. But I like The Rock as an actor and as a personality, but I just don't know. Like you said, depending on how they did that with him, it might not work as well. But one thing though is on that movie, it was one of those weird things where it just it's kind of hard to actually tell someone what kind of. If they asked me to describe what this movie was, it'd be hard to put it into a genre, because it's not really a martial arts film. But it's an action film, but it's not. I don't know. What type of movie how would you categorize this movie?
I mean, I think that's part of the reason why they had trouble selling it to an audience and marketing it, because it's an action movie that's kind of goofy, but I don't really know what you would class. I mean, it definitely falls in the action category. I think something like that would be much more marketable to today's audiences because they're used to different genres being mashed up. But I guess you would just call it an action movie, or you can call it a cult movie. Although if they tried to remake it, they couldn't really sell it as a cult movie.
Yeah, one thing too is, and this is going back to Mortal Kombat 2, is that what was my memory slipped. The Shang Tsung looking guy that was in the beginning of the movie that has the light coming out of his eyes and mouth, the main villain.
Oh, Lopan.
Yeah, that Lopan character, I think, definitely helped to create some of the Shang Tsung character from I think it was the first one, the way they looked. But it's just funny you can see that movie influenced different things, Yeah,
I mean, I think it's with we talked about The Thing having the new movie made. The Thing itself influenced so much that came after it that I don't know that you directly need to make a new entry into the franchise, because its influence has been felt in so many other places that you don't necessarily need to go back to it again. But
I don't know. I really hope they don't revisit. Like you said, maybe they did a Mad Max style, or maybe Jurassic World, where they just kind of just do it, just make a new storyline that kind of nods to the original but doesn't live off of it. Then it'd be okay, But just have to see how that goes. But what was I think one of the cooler creatures in the movie was the little seen eye thing that was floating around. I actually like that. It's just weird and creepy, looking. And I like how Kurt Russell just kind of pulled Indiana Jones and just shot it. And he's like, well, it's not going to hurt anything. Like I love that part because that was very much like him being the American Western type, because he's just going to shoot it.
Like they could have the eyeball thing. They could have gone some really weird, gross directions with that, which I would have done if I was directing it. But
I'm not following. Seriously, point that out.
Well, they could have had so when they have Kim Cattrall's character and the other girl possessed before the wedding stuff.
Yeah,
they could have had that. No, they wouldn't scissor. They could have had they could have stripped him naked and have the eyeball thing look him over from head to toe, and then it had the weird tongue.
Yeah,
and they could have had it lick their faces.
That may have got people in the seats. They wouldn't know how to market that one.
If the weird eyeball thing's looking him in the face and then just whips the tongue out and starts licking him all over the face, kind of like Jabba the Hutt.
Jabba the Hutt.
Yeah.
So when I was in college, I don't know if it was a political science class or one about Middle Eastern culture, but they were talking about how a lot of people, not a lot, but there's some contractors that are paid to be truckers in the Middle East and how dangerous it is. And at the time I was thinking that would be a perfect modern day, not perfect, but a really good modern day Jack Burton story, what he's up to now.
Yeah.
Because there'd be some real bad shit he would get into over there,
Big Trouble in Middle Pakistan.
Yeah, exactly. I don't know about the mysticism and stuff like that without being too, falling too much on the stereotypical end that might be offensive. But that would be a good place. That would be a logical place for him to be right now at his age.
Yeah.
Well, I think another thing too that you just pointed out, it's now today we're such a politically correct world that it'd be almost hard to do that movie the same way they did it in the 80s.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's just funny to me watching a lot of these movies that are older. It's just there's a lot of stuff that you couldn't get away with now. Not that movie had I wasn't racist or anything, but it just had a bunch of.
just very
stereotypical what you think of Asian people being in that area.
It falls in the same category as kind of Gremlins, I would think, in that it portrayed Asian culture in a way that was acceptable at the time, but in today's more enlightened social media backlash, think piece about everything that pisses someone off society. If you made that movie today, it would get torn apart by people pointing out inaccuracies and stereotypical things happening.
People are kind of upset about Jurassic Park because of Bryce Howard Dallas's role, because she's very the stereotypical kind of science-minded, strict, doesn't have children, woman who's wrong, and Chris Pratt plays the male who is right, and you know what I mean? He ends up knowing better.
So it's a stark contrast from the characters in Fury Road with
that's kind of what the criticisms are on that, as far as I guess from
I know this is a little different, but since the movie Tropic Thunder, a lot of people don't use the word retard anymore. For example, a show I love, Arrested Development, back in 2003 was the third season, and they had Charlize Theron on there who played a mentally challenged character, but they used the word retard a lot. You could not do that now. Yeah, it
depends on the context too.
Yeah, but generally though, it's just funny. Just even just 10 years ago, or a little over 10 now, how much things have changed.
Another thing with Big Trouble, as far as the stereotype stuff goes, I think another reason why it gets somewhat of a pass is that because the movies has so much fantastical elements to it and goofy stuff, goofy monsters, all this thing, it's this isn't to be taken seriously. So you can kind of look at it as, this isn't how Chinese culture really is. This is just all kind of...
Yeah, it wouldn't fall into
very much make-believe.
It wouldn't fall into an exploitation film or anything.
Well, I think part of it too, the fact that when you look at the movie once it's ended, that Wang Chi's kind of the main protagonist in the action scenes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
he's kind of, the story revolves around him. Jack Burton just happens to be there. If Jack Burton wasn't there, this still would have happened.
Yeah, he's kind of like Mad Max.
Like Mad Max, yeah. Fury Road.
So
it's whatever was going on was still going to happen regardless if he was there or not. He just happened to be, he was just there because he wanted money. He wanted some money in a bet, and he wanted to make sure he can get it, so he rode with him to the airport and got involved in everything.
Well, too, towards the end when they're getting ready to go back and try to save Gracie and Wang Chi's, I guess, fiance. They're at the restaurant, and then Egg Shen shows up with the guys who are from the Chinese gang that are the good guys. And Kurt Russell's like, do they even speak English? And the guy's like, what's his problem? Like perfect English, even kind of like a California accent. And, I think those are, that was at least some self-awareness, even in 86. So they weren't completely bereft of, realizing that they can't be too stereotypical in their portrayals.
Yeah. I think one of my favorite scenes, too, is at the end of the movie, toward the end, when they're going to go and do the raid before the marriage, and they're going through like the earth tunnels, and like the guy gets eaten by like the worm creature out of the wall. How it just causes Kurt Russell's character to freak out. I was like, "What's going on?" And I was like, "Because
again, he's you're with the audience like catching up to him. Like everybody else is like, oh, it's just a worm thing."
Yeah, and like Egg Shen's like, never come back out. He's like, but it came out in the first, as he had like a reaction that most people would really have. It just kind of made him leery. Like they had to slide down the hole where they end up on top of all the fish, and he didn't want to do that. Like, I don't know. I just like that movie a lot because his character wasn't like super heroic, and which the movie kind of will lead you to believe. So I think it kind of made it a little more, I don't know, maybe a little more real. And
one thing, too, the opening of this movie, like the style of opening this movie had was something you saw a lot in the 80s and 90s. You don't see a movie open like that too much anymore. So like when Jack's in a truck and it has like the music going and stuff like that, you don't really see too many movies open in that way anymore. Mm-hmm. So it's just kind of like, a fun sequence that just then it's not in, vogue now to make a movie where you have...
Which it would have been the original opening.
Yeah.
And then, it really comes full circle because it would begin with him in the truck and end with him in the truck. And
yeah. All right. So I think we can just, kind of go around and wrap up any final thoughts before we end the podcast. So we can start with Derek.
Yeah, I really like this movie just in retrospect because you can definitely see some of the influences the movie caused. Like I think it gave a kind of heavy influence to some of the Mortal Kombat characters, which is kind of cool to see. I kind of wish they had done a little bit more with the godlike characters in there because I think they were kind of interesting, their different powers. But one scene we neglected to talk about, which is the scene that's like the one you always see, is toward the end when the guy inflates himself at the point where he explodes. And I just like love that scene because that was like very much like 80s, just like, I don't know, just practical effects, like I just love that because movies don't do that stuff anymore. I even love like it blows up, all of his guts fly out across the floor and stuff, But I really enjoyed it. It just Kurt Russell being the Kurt Russell character from the 80s, and him not being, it was kind of an interesting twist too because he was the big name in the movie, but he was, like you said, he was more of like the assistant than his sidekick. So I thought it was an interesting movie. Like, it'd be nice if it had done better, but, I've really enjoyed it. It was something that's a little bit different to see. Like I said, it was Kurt Russell in the lead role, but he didn't really feel like the lead. So I thought that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it's probably the most colorful and fun John Carpenter, Kurt Russell film there is. Probably John Carpenter film, too. I mean, John Carpenter's had a lot of fun movies. I feel like this and They Live, but They Live had more of a, social commentary. But these are like two fun Carpenter films. But this one, it's part of that. I know there was four, but the well-known Kurt Russell, John Carpenter trifecta. And I think I like this one. I like this better than Escape from New York. But again, The Thing is still the top. I mean, The Thing. Sorry if I'm like struggling. I'm watching a puppy and it's in my lap freaking out.
Yeah, but the one thing too that is somewhat striking is this movie was a flop. Which when you watch it, you can kind of get the feeling, okay, the general audience might have not bought into this. And when they were making the movie, and John Carpenter wanted Kurt Russell to be in it, and he asked him to, Kurt Russell said, "Well, I don't make another flop." So he was actually worried about, because he had a few movies that flopped before that and wanted to be one that was a hit. And of course, the movie ultimately was not a hit, but became a cult hit over the years. And is now, a very famous franchise, not a franchise, a very famous movie that has a lot of fans, much more so than you would have thought based on how well it did initially. And it's just, Kurt Russell and John Carpenter was a great match that, made some great movies. It's kind of sad they didn't get a chance to make more, or that the last one they did make was Escape from L.A.
Well, I think it's kind of funny, though, is where these movies may not have been huge at the box office. I think the influence that they gave a lot of different movies and video games and stuff was pretty huge. Because you think about this, Escape from New York, and The Thing have all influenced stuff to this day. And some of my favorite characters from different games and other forms of media kind of stemmed from those movies.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the video game influences. So, you can see some of the influence of this and something like Mortal Kombat. From Escape from New York, you can definitely see the influence from that in the Metal Gear Solid series. The Thing influenced a ton of, video games, even had a video game made of its own, which is actually pretty decent. Came out, I believe, for like the Xbox and PlayStation.
Big Trouble also had a game too, I think. I saw for the Commodore.
Yeah, well, from the era when it was just cute sprites and maybe they tried to make the enemies look similar.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a sprite, it might have been a pixel.
Yeah.
Depending on which one.
So I think it's fair to say, it's a movie that we all love, and, it's one of the more highly regarded movies that, the John Carpenter, Kurt Russell era. And with that, we can go ahead and end this episode of the House by the Video Store podcast. As always, if you enjoyed what you're hearing, you can always leave us a review in iTunes, preferably a 5-star review if you leave one, just to help us get some feedback on the iTunes ratings. Also, you can always, when these posts go up on Facebook for the podcast, you make a comment there. You can send us a tweet when these go out just to let us know your opinion. Or you can always just make a comment on the site post at housebythevideostore.com. And really, the site's always the best place to see all the content we're doing, just because everything we do gets posted there. And as far as this upcoming week, there should be a post up already when you're listening to this, where I did a quick review of the new Rodney Asher directed documentary about sleep paralysis, The Nightmare. And I just went through a quick review to give, my opinion on whether or not I think it's worth checking out. And we should have some new stuff coming up this week as well. But as always, thanks for listening to the podcast. We'll have a new episode next week.